Okay, Luke, you're up.
All right, had to find the button to unmute myself. All right, well, thanks to all of you for being part of this interactive presentation. So, like y'all are on mute, but really to make this a really fun, interactive experience for all of us, like we really want to have your participation. So I'll be calling you out for some different opportunities to talk through different birds with me. And if I've never had a chance to meet before, I just want to introduce myself here really quick. My name is Luke Safford. Like Kristen said, I'm the Director of Engagement and Education here at Tucson Audubon. And along with leading Sweetwater walks, this is one of my other favorite things to do, is to just look at bird pictures with people, talk through the identification process, think through like, how do we get from seeing a bird to identifying it? Also really just want to share with everyone that, to enjoy birds and be a good bird watcher, you don't have to identify everything. So even though we're going to talk about identifying birds today and ways to do that and ways to get better at it, we're all going to come across birds that we don't know, that we can't identify, or maybe we can just get to the family, but we can't get to the specific species. And you know what? That's okay. There's actually zero things wrong with not being able to identify something. In fact, sometimes it makes the experience that much better because, you go through this learning process and really you're just enjoying the bird. So that's what it really comes down to when it comes to being a birder or a bird watcher, is just enjoying the bird. And sometimes identifying it makes that enjoyment process better. And sometimes that process is just better without even knowing what it is. So we're gonna first start with some different tips and stuff that I've been thinking through myself in the past couple months, actually the past couple weeks. And then we're going to look at some of the pictures that y'all sent in to us, and many of you did. And I'm going to be inviting you, if you're the one who sent in the picture, to talk through the identification process with me. There's a few pictures, like I said, that I'm just throwing in here for my own stuff. That means I'm going to need to have someone else jump in, even if you didn't take the picture or it's not your bird. Like, I still want to have your participation. So it's a smaller class, which is cool. It means that we all get to have a little bit more input into it. So it also means that I'll need some of you to step up. And I know some of you are more like willing and extroverted and are willing to talk through things. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. But let's start out. And what I thought is I was out birding with my wife this weekend. And my wife would not consider herself like a birder. She'd consider herself maybe a bird watcher. She likes looking at them. I don't know if she likes looking at them as much as she just likes being with me. So that kind of rubs off on her. But so I was out with her, and we were walking around Canoa Ranch. And this actually is where this picture was taking place. This isn't from this weekend. This is from a couple of years ago in September, I think, of 2019 or 18. But anyways, we were looking at some of the shorebirds there at Canoa Ranch and noticing some of the differences between killdeer, spotted sandpipers, and other birds that we were seeing there. And it just made me think about just how we look at birds and compare them to each other and think about the different families. So these two, we got two different bird species here. And so when we first see these birds, what are some questions that ought to come into our mind when we're looking at these birds? So I'm just going to work through a few of these questions in presentation mode. And then when we get into the next pictures, I'll ask some of you to come and join me through the process. All right. So when I first look at these, some questions that come to mind is, all right, what time of year are we in? Whenever I'm in this question is actually pretty easy for us to answer, because we usually we know what time of year it is, but what it does is it helps us to think about, okay, are these birds going through, are they in breeding plumage or are they in winter plumage? So like, for instance, and you kind of have to know the birds and the families a little bit to know this, but killdeer, these killdeer over here on the left, they pretty much stay in their same plumage year round. These birds, okay, so we're in like late September. These are American avocets. American avocets and many other shorebirds will be going from breeding plumage into their winter plumage later in the month of September. So if we're going out birding and we're in June, which is the thick of breeding season, we would expect birds in breeding plumage. So avocets, and they're kind of warm brown orange colors that are on their neck and their head. But now, since you know what time of year it is, you know that they're going to be in winter plumage or starting to go into that. So you begin to think, all right, now what I'm seeing is winter plumage. And so that just kind of takes the, if it's the time of year, kind of has, some say into what we're seeing. The other thing, another question that I often ask myself is what kind of habitat, where is it at within that habitat? So for instance, killdeer are very rarely out in the water. They're usually up on dry land, like you see these guys here. And avocets, more often than not, have their legs in the water and are, kind of feeding on the surface of the water. And so, you can kind of tell if you begin to understand a little bit about what birds are doing and where birds are at, whether they're shorebirds or whether they're like warblers. Some warblers are higher in the canopy, and other warblers are lower in the shrubs. So as we begin to see where birds are at and put ourselves out there, like Nancy was telling me, she was out birding a lot of different spots over the weekend. And so as you're at different locations and you see birds, think about where you continue to see spotted toadies. Are they usually on the ground or are they high up in the trees? Well, they're usually on the ground. Where do we often see cormorants? They're usually in deeper water. And where do we see coots? Most of the time they're, kind of not always out in deep water. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times in the marsh area. So you begin to see patterns of where birds are at. And here we see a pattern that holds true with killdeer on the land and avocets out in the water. And it's just something that not only do you get from reading a Sibley bird guide, but just from noticing it. So begin to notice where birds are at in the habitat. Body structure, of course. So like you can see the avocets have a longer neck. They have a bigger body. Killdeer have more of a compact, the neck and the head and the body, they're all kind of really close to each other, and avocets kind of more stretched out. And then, especially for shorebirds, talking about bill shape or length, but I guess not just for shorebirds, just for any bird, like the bill is a big indicator of what kind of family it's in or what it feeds on. And let me silence my phone here. There we go. So bill shape and length, of course, is always a big question anytime we see a bird. And then leg length and color, that's a big one for shorebirds. And so as you get into different families, you begin to ask yourself different questions. A question I always ask with shorebirds is that leg length or color. So you can't really tell color so much on the killdeer, a little bit on the avocets, kind of that gray color, but definitely longer legs than these birds over here. So you can begin to see, just like if you're a beginning birder, not even knowing what an avocet or a killdeer are, you begin to notice, okay, there's two different birds here. That's a good start. Just noticing there's two different types, two different body structures. And then so you begin to ask yourself these different questions and writing down notes. One of the other questions I ask is behavior. Hard to tell behavior from a picture, but behavior was something that stood out to me a lot as I was talking with my wife this weekend about different birds we were seeing as we were walking along the Danza Trail. what was the bird doing. So she has a lot better ears than I do. So she was hearing Aver's towhee scratching around in the leaves. And she asked me, is that something that towhees always do? And like, well, yeah, towhees often, they really like to scratch around on the ground. And what are they looking for? They're looking for bugs, or they're looking for, trying to find other things to eat on the ground. So you won't really ever see a ruby crowned kinglet raking around in the leaves. You'll see them fluttering about and catching bugs on the wing, kind of like a flycatcher almost, and fluttering their wings. So behavior is a really good key. So those are some of the questions I ask myself every time I see a bird. These questions start going through my mind. And some of you might have other questions. Any other questions that when you see a bird, what else goes through your mind? Anything else that you all want to add here to other questions? Or does that cover everything? Well, let's look. Let's see if there's any other questions that pop up. So here's another question. What kind of family group is it in? So as we begin to know birds, we begin to understand that there's family groups, right? Sparrows, terns, warblers, finches, waterfowl. So you have a lot of these different families. And if you can just, Kirsten was actually talking about this a little bit as she was talking about her pelagic trip. And she was talking about the shearwaters and how she never saw them on the water, right, Kirsten? You never saw them on the water. Sometimes they do land on the water, but not very often. They're mostly just gliding, and really gliding is a better word than flying, really. They just like move around like that. And but the rhinoceros auklet, was it in the water or was it flying?
That was in the water.
It was in the water, right? So like auklets, you'll most often see them on the water. They have really weak flight when they do get up. And shearwaters, they're just gliding around. So there you can see like, all right, at least I can get this bird I'm seeing. If you're out in the pelagic and you're looking at a bird, what is it doing? You can start narrowing it down into certain families, and that can really help with this ID process. So we got two different birds right here. We have one is a tern and one is a gull. Has anyone ever been to Cape Canaveral Beach in Florida before?
I have.
Yeah. Who has?
Allison.
Oh yeah. Hey, Allison, well, you're gonna help me with another bird later, but it's all right. You want to help me with this one?
Sure.
All right. So what are some things that we think about? We see there's two different species here. How do you know one is a tern and one's a gull?
Well, the color and shape of the bill. Terns usually have, really pointed, you can see on the gull, the bill turns down at the end, and the terns is very sharp and pointy. I've never seen too many gulls with red or orange bills, except for what's that black-headed gull. But also the shorter neck, the gull happens to be hunched down a little bit here, but on terns, they almost always sit like that, real hunched down and very linear, very horizontal in their stance. Their legs are shorter, kind of closer to the ground. The primaries or the wingtips tend to extend way out, back on a tern, because they have those long pointy wings. When they fly, you'll see real angular and pointed wings.
Yeah.
And on some of the terns, like the royal tern here, you've got that little mohawky kind of haircut there.
Yeah, they usually have kind of a black cap.
Yeah, black. Some of them have black caps, and some of them also have that sticks out in the back like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. It just really goes right along with the three things, three little points I put on here, that longish pointy bill. So, and then the shorter legs, and like you were describing the wings when it's flying, and we don't get to see it fly here, but just that slenderness that comes with a tern, both in flight, and you can kind of see that here. I mean, the laughing gull that it's next to is a fairly big and heavy gull, but you can see the royal tern, it does look a little more slender. And so very little of this had to do with color, right? I mean, think about that as Allison was describing that. How many of those differences had to do with color? Like hardly any of it. Maybe a little bit of the color of the bill, but that's not even, there's a lot of terns with black bills as well. But they all had to do with shape and structure. And so that's such a huge thing for us to think about when we're working to identify something, is shape and structure often come before color. Thanks so much for talking through that. I appreciate that. So here's another pair of birds from a different portion of the country. This is from the Dungeness Spit in Washington State. And it was a very gray day. And when it's gray, the color doesn't stand out as much. It certainly does in this harlequin duck, though. And there's usually hardly any color at all in the pelagic cormorant. But we can see this picture and begin to think about, all right, what am I seeing here? And so anyone here from Washington or been up to Washington before?
Well, that would be me again.
You've been all over. How about someone else? Someone else, even if you haven't been to Washington, who would want to jump in and help me out talking about the difference in the pelagic cormorant and the harlequin duck?
Hi there. I lived in Washington for about 9 years.
Yay! Yeah. So what are you seeing here?
Well, I kind of jumped in late on this call. So what am I looking for? Or
Oh,
the
yeah.
body structure you're telling?
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, so we're talking about just being able to see differences between bird families.
Mhm.
And so when you see a couple birds together, what are the things that you're looking for that might tell you just differences? So we're just looking at differences, especially in body structure.
Yeah. Well, I see that the cormorant has a longer neck and a longer beak and a longer body too.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. That neck length and bill shape is like, it stands out big time.
Mhm.
Yeah,
They're also low to the water, both of these.
they are. They are. And that's definitely, it's really interesting. And like loons will be almost even lower. And let's see, like if, like geese will be up higher, and a lot, other like dabbling ducks like northern pintail or American widgeon will be up a little bit higher too. They just have a little more, what's that, like buoyancy, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Anything else that you notice here?
I noticed the coloring on the harlequin duck is different.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
So we
obviously.
talked a little bit about how color maybe is not the most useful thing, but here you're right. I was kind of hoping that you'd point that out.
Yeah. The white is really noticeable, even though it's, dim lighting and it's not bright and sunny. You can tell it's a different color.
Yeah. Thanks so much for jumping in there. I appreciate that. So
Thank you.
yeah. So again, I just kind of emphasizing what we're talking about is that the shape and the structure of birds is so important because it helps us to put it into families. And then even within the same family, you begin to have some differences as well. But almost all cormorants will have kind of this longer neck and will have a thin bill. And almost all ducks, well, some ducks have longer necks than others, but a lot of diving ducks will have kind of shorter necks and smaller bills, not as long and not as thin as a cormorant. Although mergansers, which is another type of duck, they'll have kind of a long, thin bill at times too, especially like red-breasted mergansers. But then it would have been good to have a red-breasted merganser and pelagic cormorant together. But even then, you'll see the differences. And the way that how far down the body is into the water, like how buoyant it is, that is a thing to look for as well. And so you kind of take all those things into consideration, and you can look at your bird guide, or you can look at, just take notes, and then if you're sharing that information with someone, that'll help to identify that bird. Oh, that body shape on here as well. You can tell the pelagic cormorant just looks a little bit longer, and the harlequin duck a little bit more compact. Kirsten, any questions that we can get to up to this point?
No specific questions
Okay.
have come through in the chat. I did throw a link to a page about the red-breasted merganser in the chat if anyone's interested.
Awesome.
I got to see some of those in San Diego as well. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, and they do. Did you notice that really long bill on them? Really long.
Oh
thin bill?
yeah, it's like a little like dagger.
Yeah. But they won't have that long neck like a cormorant. That's one of the body structure things to look for. So here's one more comparison. How about someone work through these guys with me? What do you see here? No one's willing to jump in?
Well, the tail on the ruddy duck, the ruddy typically has a little tail up in the air like that when you see them.
Oh, thank you. That's Nancy, right? That's Nancy
Yes.
talking. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, so it's probably really apparent if you're able to see this picture. Nancy nailed it right on. Like, the big thing is one of these birds, this ruddy duck over here on the far left, has this big tail that sticks up. That's why it's a type of a stiff-tailed duck. And these eared grebes over here have literally no tail. And you can see that many of these eared grebes are almost like sinking in the water. A lot of times when grebes are in the water, their body is a lot in the water, I guess. And it's kind of like how we're talking about in the cormorant harlequin duck, like some sit lower in the water than others. And you can't really see the bill shape on the ruddy duck, but we can see the bill shape on these eared grebes. And they're just really small, really thin, not what you would typically see in like a puddle duck, like a mallard or American widgeon. So you can kind of tell right off the bat that, hey, this little flock of water birds that I'm seeing here, look at the bill and that small thin bill. Oh, well, maybe it's a grebe, because a lot of grebes have that kind of thinner, longer kind of, or not longer, thinner kind of shorter bill like that, and no tail. So, oh, maybe that's a grebe, and then you can turn to the grebe portion in your Sibley guide. So just some things to think about when you're seeing birds together. All right, so let's get to some of your pictures that you sent in. And this picture was sent in by Pat Heller. Pat, are you on the call with us? Trying to look through the participant list here. Oh, I see Pat. Oh, you're still on mute.
Okay.
Got you. Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks for sending this in, Pat. So
Yes.
a couple questions for you. I always like to start with questions. So where were you when you saw this, and what time of year was it? And just tell us a little bit about your experience with it.
Well, first of all, I'm in Colorado now, where we're trying to, that's where we live. I was in Tucson. Temperature now we're hovering at near 6.
Horrible.
We're hoping it might get up to maybe 12 today, possibly. Anyway, we go back and forth to Tucson over the winter, and this was photographed about, I think about
A week ago.
a little over a week ago, maybe.
Okay.
And one of my favorite birds, I was hoping for well, you know what I was hoping for, but which it's not, but popped up actually surprisingly, because I hadn't seen it in this habitat, was at Tohono Chul and the gardens there in the very back area.
Okay.
Where you can walk way back there. And it was in these, I think it was in the mesquite, the feather mesquite.
Mhm.
And yeah, so of course I heard them first making their little sounds.
Oh, cool. So you did hear it. Perfect.
Yeah, briefly.
Yeah.
Not very much though, not typically as I've heard them vocalize more.
Right.
So, right. And so that's the question.
Yeah. Thanks, Pat. Thanks for
Hoping
sharing
for
that
the
background.
latter.
The
Yeah.
background's always really important, like where you saw it, what time of year. So a week ago, so
Maybe 2 weeks.
black-tailed gnatcatchers,
Yeah.
they're in breeding season right now. So they're one of our early breeders, like a lot of our Sonoran Desert birds. And so they'll be not only making their nest now, but they're starting to lay eggs here anytime. And so this guy right here, since it's breeding season, in breeding plumage. So black-tailed gnatcatchers do have a black cap, kind of a black hood almost in breeding season, the males do. So we can be ready for that. You saw it at Tohono Chul, so right in town in the Sonoran Desert habitat. That's really important too. So there's actually 3 types of gnatcatchers that you can see in Southeast Arizona, and only 3. So what's good about that is that you can eliminate other gnatcatchers besides those 3, which is black-tailed, blue-gray, and black-capped. And so you can eliminate blue-gray because it has a black cap. So that's a good one. You can knock that one out. So then you just have those 2. That's one ID tip that I have is just begin eliminating birds you know that it can't be and narrowing it down. And that'll help the process a little bit. So when we think about whether it's black-tailed or black-capped, along with location and time of year, well, habitat is another really good question to talk about. So it's in the Sonoran Desert habitat here in Tucson. One thing to know about black-capped is that they are usually not much, they're pretty rare, but they don't really come north of around Madera Canyon area. So normally they're from Madera Canyon on south, and they like more riparian areas. So they like to be in a little bit, not way up high in the trees, although they can be, but they're in usually larger trees, more in like, they feed in kind of like a higher level than what you would normally see at black-tailed. Black-tailed like to be down in the understory of Sonoran Desert scrub. Black-capped gnatcatchers like to be in more of the larger trees and riparian zones along creeks. So if you're in town in one of the parks, maybe 99.9% of the gnatcatchers that you would see with the black on the head would be black-tailed. I don't think I've heard of black-capped all the way up here because of just the habitat that we have. You also mentioned, Pat, that you heard it. So there's maybe one of the biggest differences between black-capped and black-tailed is just the sound that it makes. And so familiarizing yourself with those two sounds, you don't necessarily have to like record it or anything, but just remembering what that sound is like and then comparing it. You can go to different sites like eBird or Xenocanto and compare the sounds if that's something that you're able to do and remember. One thing we can't see from this picture is the underside of the tail. So that's a big difference between the two gnatcatchers. And you'll find that when you're looking at identifying different types of birds that are similar to each other, there's usually just like something specific that tells them apart. So like on a gnatcatcher, black-tailed or black-capped, it's the underside of the tail. And whether it's black, mostly black, or whether it's mostly white. And so if it's mostly white, then you have yourself a black-capped, or maybe a blue-gray, because a blue-gray will have all white underneath the tail too. If it's mostly black, then you have yourself a black-tailed gnatcatcher. And so I'm always trying to, like, as I'm looking at gnatcatchers, they have those cool long tails that kind of pop up, and just waiting as they move around a lot, which is good and bad. Good as in they move around, so they position their tails in different spots. So you can see the underside of that tail if you're patient enough and if it moves in the right way. And oftentimes they do, because they do like to kind of position their tails and cock them, and they help you out a little bit with that. So I don't know if you got to see the underside of this guy's tail.
Yeah,
I do say guy because the female wouldn't have the black cap, but were you able to see it at all, Pat?
I did. In fact, I have another photo that does show the clear underside of the tail. The bird popped around and actually was very cooperative in showing me.
Yeah. And was it all
So,
black, mostly black under the tail?
yes, yes.
Okay. Yep.
As you know, I was hoping, although I was fairly certain it wasn't a black cap, but you're
Hey,
right.
hope
it's the
springs
wrong
eternal,
cap.
right? We can always hope.
Hope springs.
And we always have to be careful not to say it's just a black-tailed gnatcatcher, because they're really cool birds, and they're pretty range restricted as well. So like it's a pretty special bird that people come from all over to Tucson to see. So when we get to see them, we should kind of take that in too. Another, just the bill length is something that kind of hard to tell, but the bill length on a black cap will be longer as well. So, every time that you're comparing species that are real similar to each other, they usually have some really specific thing that's different, like the underside of the tail or the voice. Voice is always really key too.
The other thing, Luke, that I was reading was the black over the top in the black cap. The black goes below the eye. Is that correct?
So I think in the black tail, most of the time it goes below the eye. Now this one's really not.
Right. Okay.
But I think it varies a little bit, maybe with what period of breeding season they're in, or birds just have some variation. So I don't know if it may help in some instances. It definitely, unfortunately, doesn't really help us much in this one. But Pat, thanks so much for sharing this one.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. And it's fun to talk through these birds. I think I've learned a lot just talking through it together with all of you.
So before we move on from the gnatcatchers, Allison has a question, and I actually was wondering the same thing. So thank you for asking it, Allison. Is there a difference in the eye rings? I was just trying to look at pictures, and it seems like they both have pretty bright white eye rings.
Yeah, I haven't heard, without looking myself and a sibling to just confirm all of this, but I haven't heard of that as like a marker of that to look for when you're trying to differentiate the two. Mostly it's just been the ones that I pay the most attention to are voice, underside of the tail. The color usually the color on a black-tailed is a little bit more buffier, browner, and a black cap is a little bit more grayer. This one looks pretty gray to me though. So like, I don't know if that's like a real good marker, but that can be one too. But I haven't heard much about the eye ring. It stands out a lot on this guy right here. That's for sure.
Well, it looks sensibly like it's more distinct in the black-tailed, but you can sort of see it in the black cap. It's and that may just be the way it's drawn in Sibley.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that the pictures I'm looking at, like it seems like it depends on the picture and the angle. It's
and that's a really good thing to think about, is that pictures lie sometimes. It's so much better to identify a bird when you have it in front of you and you're actually looking at it. I do have used pictures I've taken to go back and to study them and to see if they, if I can identify it from the picture. But sometimes, in a picture, you don't get to see every portion of the bird. And, it's sometimes difficult. All right, Allison, you sent in this little guy right here.
Yeah.
So,
it's a sparrow.
Yep. For all of us here, what about this bird right here screams sparrow to you?
The coloring and the bill, and you can't really see it very well in this picture, but the overall shape and of the bird and where it was and the activity. Like this branch is only a few feet off the ground. So it wasn't way up in a tree. It had popped up onto this low branch.
Yep.
It was skulking a lot in the lower brush. Didn't come at every time I approached, it would just disappear into the brush. And then I'd have to back out off and it would come back out just a little bit and I'd move forward and it would disappear again. And finally I backed way off. I had my camera with a really long lens and waited, and it finally popped up like that, almost as if to see if I was gone. And then when it saw me, it dove back into the brush again.
That's funny. So all very good points about why it's a sparrow and just the overall I guess gist of what it was like to see this bird. So share with us where you're at and what time of year it was.
It was last month, and I was staying in Dos Cabezas, so I went up to the Chiricahuas, and I was at that parking area by Faraway Ranch.
Yeah.
So it's all, a lot of grassy areas and, the mixed oaks and pines and whatnot. So, so that's where it was.
Okay.
Very
it's always good, like whether it's winter or summer or spring or fall, like if you're using like a Sibley guide or another field guide, being able to see what birds are around in the winter in the Chiricahuas, rather than what birds are here in the summer. So like, as we'll see, this guy right here, he's a winter visitor. He's a wintering bird and is here through portions of early spring and late fall, but will not be here during the summer. So that helps with, figuring out what it is a little bit too. So what else? So you mentioned a few things of what you saw with this bird. The bill kind of came out. So the sparrow bill, but it's kind of a somewhat small bill. We got the face, contrast on the face between the gray, the brown, and the buffy. The little crest stood out to me. What else stood out to you there, Allison?
Well, when I first saw it in the brush, I thought song sparrow because of all the streaking that was on the chest and back and whatnot, but there wasn't there wasn't the right coloring for that, and he didn't have a spot on his chest, and he, just there were some differences. So I started questioning my initial thoughts there.
Mhm.
But
What did you come up with?
I came up with Lincoln Sparrow.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's what I came up with too.
because once I never got a good enough look at it with the binoculars because I couldn't get close. And like I said, I had like a 400 millimeter lens with an extender. So I backed way off and then just took a load of pictures thinking I'll see if my hypothesis is right by the time when I get home.
Yep.
So the goldness in the golden kind of coloring on the upper chest with the streaks
Yeah.
is, kind of what sealed the deal for me. Plus the lack of because song sparrows can have, a variety of coloring. So,
Yep.
but they never have that I know.
You're totally right. And it's that really thin streaking, like a song sparrow, will be kind of heavier, kind of messy, just kind of
Blotchy.
just yeah, kind of brown. I mean, really like brown color rather than a buffy. Us birders, we really like our colors and we like to describe them different ways. But this buffiness, like you said, never really seen on a song sparrow. And so yeah, Lincoln's, and then the activity of it.
Yeah.
I always think of Lincoln sparrows as kind of acting more like a mouse. They have kind of a mousy feel to me in their activity, and they're scurrying around. A song sparrow, a little bit heavier, a little bit more
More toey-ish.
deliberate.
and more toey-ish the way that they scratch.
Yeah. So that activity and behavior, is a really good key too. So sparrows can be hard. Does anyone find sparrows hard other than me and Allison? Like anyone else find these a little bit tough?
Yes, me.
Yes.
I have a really hard time with sparrows.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I think Allison mentioned that one way she knew this was a sparrow was, I think you mentioned the color. They're just kind of brown. There's other small brown birds, like wrens will usually be small and brown, but they'll have a different shape of bill. They'll usually have a different shape of body too, like a little bit more compact tail, maybe a little bit longer. But that bill's totally different from a wren and a sparrow. Some finches you'll see feeding on the ground, but they'll have kind of a different, shorter bill, heavier bill structure, or in sometimes heavier, sometimes not, but just like different bill structure, and they'll be sitting more upright than most sparrows. But yeah, normally we'll see those brown birds on the ground that give us some sparrow stuff.
I recently went on a walk with Jeff Babson from Pima County. If anyone on the call knows him, he's very good at sparrow ID. So he kind of walked us through several different sparrows. But what he said was one of the most important thing is actually like the sparrow behavior, as Luke was saying earlier. He kind of looks at the field marks last, but it's more about, are they in a flock? Are they by themselves? Are they near the water? Are they up in the trees? Things like that is actually kind of narrows the list down to just a couple species instead of 10 or 12, and that just takes practice, of course.
Lots of practice. Speaking of what sparrows are doing, we got this one up on a fence line, and this was sent in by Carol, and Carol couldn't make it today, but I told her we're going to go through a couple of her sparrow pictures here. She was down in the San Rafael grasslands, which is south of Tucson, hoping to find a Baird sparrow. This one right here, let's compare it a little bit to this last sparrow we saw. And here's a few things that I noticed about it. Just the habitat you can see here with the Lincoln sparrow, got the oaks right there. Savannah sparrow that we see here, like big open, there's nothing behind it. you can see some grasses coming up in the grasslands. So just like a little bit different habitat. So you're going to see different types of sparrows there. But habitat, the posture is a little bit more upright. So some sparrows have more of a compact kind of, well, in wind, if it's windy and it's out on a fence line like this, it'll kind of change the posture a little bit. But the posture of sparrows, if it's a grasshopper sparrow, will be really low and compact. If it's a savanna sparrow, it'll be more upright. So thinking about posture of birds is really important. You can see a little bit of the yellow right here. This is the lores. So when you got the bill and you got the eye, and that little eyebrow just between the bill and the eye, that's called the lores. And savanna sparrows have a little bit of a yellow lore right there, and more brown in the back. So it's just that yellow. If there is any yellow, it's pretty much right there between the bill and the eye. And that's something when you're looking at a sparrow, what's the color of the lores? And so even when you go back to the Lincolns, all right, so it's just gray, and that gray extends up over the eye. That's an important thing. You won't find, well, some song sparrows will have a little bit of gray there, but not this big definite gray with the buffy color underneath. So those lores are really important. And then for sparrows, always looking at the streaking on the chest and what the color of the chest is underneath of that streaking. In the Lincolns, we saw that was buffy. On this savanna sparrow, we see that's really white underneath that really bold streaking. And it's kind of heavy bold. On the Lincolns, it was just kind of really thin, but still pretty striking. But this savanna sparrow has thick, bold streaking all the way from just below the throat, all pretty far down its chest, and then down the sides. And so other species of sparrows, like chipping sparrows, there will be no streaking on the breast. White-crowned sparrows, no streaking on the breast. Savanna sparrows, we have this streaking on a really white breast. And so then we come to this one, and this one's a little bit tougher because as Carol was sending these pictures to me, she was trying to compare savanna sparrows and Baird sparrows. Baird sparrow is one that you go out to the San Rafael grasslands to really look for, and they can be harder to find. This one, I'm a little, it's a little bit hard with the picture. I'm still trying to figure this one out, honestly. But what I see here is I see some streaking that's pretty heavy streaking all the way from the throat down to the top of the breast, all through the chest, and then down on the sides. And then I do see some yellow right here and some eyebrow. It kind of has this eye line going through here, a little bit of yellow on the lores. So I'm thinking it's a savanna sparrow as well. Like if it was a Baird sparrow, it would have a lot more yellow back here as well, and not have as defined eye line. So like those are the different things to look for between savanna and Baird sparrow. But really, for all of us, whenever we're looking at sparrow, looking at the eye lines, whether it's distinct or not, looking at the facial pattern is really important. I believe this is a savanna sparrow because I just don't see a lot of this. Okay, here's a Baird sparrow. See how it has hardly any defined eye line right here, hardly any defined eye line. And then the face is just really like yellow, orangish, almost over the whole face, both from all the way from the beak, all the way over its whole face, all the way to the neck almost. And when you see this one, that yellow is pretty much just right there in the lores, and this is pretty white back here and more of an eye line than I would think on a Baird sparrow, which is more like this guy right here. So they can be really tough, but looking at those facial patterns is really important for sparrows, and you can get into the nitty gritty of that for each specific species. But So Carol, I'm thinking that both of these are Savannah. They just have a little bit, the thing that gets me here is the posture looks a little bit lower, but it might be because of the wind, I'm not sure. And then a Baird's would have more of just like a more of a breast band or a collar or something. And this is like the streaking's like all down through the breast. So I don't know if anyone else here has experience with Baird's sparrow. If you do, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, we'll move on.
I'll just
Kirsten,
point out,
any questions? Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'll just point out what I put in the chat real quickly. So I was just looking at the two birds in this. Oh, sorry, my blurring is kind of, there we go. Birds of, nope, it wants to blur. Birds of southeastern Arizona. And the author just notes that the Baird's is a lot shyer. So you'll normally see them in the grass, whereas the Savannah sparrow is a lot more likely to sit up on a conspicuous perch. So I think that really tracks with the ideas that you're
Especially the picture I chose, right? This is the only picture I have of Baird's, and it's neck deep in grass.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good example of how the behavior can kind of help cinch that ID. Yeah.
Yeah. So my experience, sometimes like really cold mornings or first thing in the morning, Baird's sparrows will get up on the fence lines and help us out a little bit. But more often than not, you're gonna see a bird in the grass and it's gonna get up and it's gonna go laying in the grass and you have to try and find it. It's fun, right? And difficult and frustrating at the same time to try and find that guy. Hey, Raul, I think I saw you on the call with us. Let's talk about this woodpecker. Right.
Good morning, sir. Yeah, I saw this woodpecker. You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I saw this woodpecker down at Whitewater Draw this weekend. And like I said in my message earlier, is it a nuddle or a ladder? Because they're very, very similar.
Yeah, they certainly are. Thanks so much, Raul, for sending this in. And yeah, so I'll just say Whitewater Draw has been fantastic. If any of you are able to go down there and check it out, it's been really good lately. And so going back to this ladderback woodpecker, let's or nuddles. I let the cat out of the bag there, but let's think about some other things that we can say about this woodpecker for sure. We can say it's a female because it has the black crown and not the red that you would find on a male ladderback or Nuttall's woodpecker. And actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the trusty eBird, not my email. Here's eBird. Okay, let's go to Explore. And let's type in Nuttall's woodpecker. All right, so here's a male Nuttall's woodpecker. And so what I found with these Nuttall's, and then we'll look at ladderback too, they're super similar. They're almost exactly alike, except for a few things that we'll look at. Here's the female Nuttall's woodpecker. So from what I've seen is that the Nuttall's woodpecker has a lot more, they're blacker and have fewer white ladders on their back than a ladderback woodpecker. They also have a thicker black striping at the top base of their back. So this portion right here, if you can see my little mouse, the top black on the back is thicker than what you would see on a ladderback. And same with the black on the face. It's blacker and it's more extensive. Now, that's there's not much of a difference. See, it's very closely related. Let's go to ladderback. Here's ladderback. You see a lot more white on the back, along with the white and black streaking. Here's the female. A little bit more limited black at the top of that back. See, it's very slim black right there, and a lot more white. So again, here's this ladder back with all this white. See that? And then let's go back to Nuttles and look at that female. A lot more black on there. So not too big of a difference, but a little difference. The big difference is when you look at the range map. I love range maps. I love maps. I just love maps. In fact, I was looking at a map of Maine yesterday, and like I have maps all over my house. But look at this map here of Nuttall's woodpecker. Really specific, and right there, almost all just in California. So they're one of these birds that, let's go in a little bit more here. They're one of these birds that they don't migrate. They don't really move out of their area. So you begin to recognize that there's some of these birds that just, they don't move a lot. So like Verdin, for us, is one of these birds that they just don't move around very much. And you know how we have like rare visitors come and visit us in Southeast Arizona, like roseate spoonbill or Prothonotary warbler. Those are birds that move around and migrate or disperse, kind of like painted buntings. They move around a lot. But then we have these other birds that are more sedentary, and they just stay right where they're at. And Verdin, Nuttles and ladderback woodpecker fit into that. Wren tit is one along the coast that's really like that. You know, there's other birds that are very specific to where they're at. And so you begin to know a bird and whether it's one that could or would go to a different location somewhere in the United States, or whether it's just one that just stays right where they're at. And so thankfully for us, because I can't imagine having to go birding every time and try to figure out whether it's a Nuttles or a ladderback woodpecker, because of how similar they are. Luckily for us, here's Nuttles woodpecker. This is where they live. And then let's go back up to ladderback woodpecker and look to see where they live. A little bit larger area. They do overlap into California a little bit, but here in Tucson, that's just what we have. And so if we go back to the picture that Raul sent in, you can see the back here. There's quite a bit of extensive white on the back, lots of ladders, and then just a little bit of black near the top of the back. So Raul, that's kind of what I'm thinking that we have here. And very good bird. Ladderback woodpeckers are always a treat to see. And so, and honestly, I'm just thankful that I don't have to differentiate between those two species like I do some of these other ones that we have. And here's one that, as we're moving on here, we got we'll need to do like another 10 minutes here. We'll go to 12:10 or so. Jim, you sent this one in, and unlike Nuttles and ladderback, which are usually pretty separate, here we have these Empidonex flycatchers, and especially for this one, either a Hammonds or a Dusky, they're notoriously hard to separate. So, Jim, tell us what you have here.
Well, first of all, it was seen last Friday over at Pepper Sauce Canyon, so location, and that's an area where there's a lot of sycamore trees and large growth trees and stuff like that. Behavior-wise, I really didn't notice a lot of. It was just I saw actually 4 of them, 4 different birds in 4 different areas, and they were like one area they were just up high in the tree, looking down like this one is, and then some of them were down along the fence there in the campground. So the first thing I noticed here in the picture, and it's always difficult when you're out in the field just looking at those real quickly, is that long primary projection on the wings there. down. So,
Yes,
and
you sent me a couple different pictures actually. And I should have had both of them up here. I should have kept both of them. So when I was looking at the pictures, this picture, the primary, and when we talk about primary, it's this wing, this part of the wing right here, the part that sticks down. To me, this one looked the primary looked shorter in proportion to the tail. And the other one you sent me, it looked a little bit longer in proportion to the tail.
yeah. They're difficult.
But you saw it in person, which is the best, because like when you see it in a picture, it's hard to tell. But have all these different things over here. Did you happen to hear its voice at all?
No sounding at all. So
And that's pretty normal during winter.
yeah.
So during the winter, it's you just don't get these flycatchers talking much.
And then a couple other things I know. Well, definitely the notch in the tail is pretty common, but that's in both of them.
Yeah.
And the bill, is sort of dark. It's got a little. That's just maybe the sun on it or whatever, which is pretty common. But I think the one that for me, if I was going to distinguish the two, is that the vest. It really has a vest looking breast on, which the dusky doesn't really have that much. So, but one of the things you didn't mention that I think is a real good way to identify birds, especially if you're going into a new area or whatever, is you go into eBird and you look to see who the real good birders are and what they saw the day before. And if you look on this one, you'll see all kinds of top birders there that, describing this bird as the dusky, and you see their pictures and they're very similar. So that's one of the ways I do it. I look to see what other people have seen in that area, especially real good birders, and see their photos and compare them. So
yeah, I'll be honest, I've done that before. I would also caution against that for a couple of reasons. One is because even good birders make mistakes, right? And then also there's something about just working through the ID process yourself and talking through it. Yeah, so I would just caution against that a little bit. Although I will say I have definitely done that same thing, Jim.
well, I usually do it after the fact just to see,
Okay, yeah.
If what I saw and recorded was the same. So just to verify. So if I had listed as Dusty, and then I'm go online and look and everybody else listed it as Hammonds, then I would question my Dusky real carefully and go back and relook at it again.
Yeah. And so what did you decide on this one?
Hammonds.
Hammonds.
Yeah.
So what the first picture you sent me, I thought I had it on here and I had Hammond's flycatcher as a bird. And then he sent me this picture and I was like, oh man, those wings the tail looks longer compared to the wings. So then I was thinking dusky, and I just put a question mark after. I honestly wasn't quite sure on this one, whether it's a dusky or a Hammond's. I could go either way. I could be convinced either one. And without other pictures and without seeing it in person, like if I was eBirding it, I would probably put it as thankfully eBird is really cool. They understand we don't identify everything very well. So they have a dusky / Hammond's flycatcher that you can mark on your eBird checklist. I could be convinced either way as a Hammond's or a dusky on this one. With this picture, the other one looked a lot more Hammond's to me.
Well, Crosley says that silent birds are best left unidentified when it comes to the like this. So, and he's probably right.
But There's something in us that just wants to identify everything, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
We got to fight against that sometimes. Thanks for sharing that, Jim. Appreciate it. Those are always tough. They're always tough. All right, here's our last one. And Irene, you sent in this guy
Yeah.
right here on this big agave stalk.
It's a morning walk I do every day. And I live at the base of the Catalina foothills. And there's always birds perching on this, I forget what it is, ocotillo maybe? No, I don't know.
I think it's like an agave stalk, and it's probably some
Right, it
better
is.
description of it, but
And my first guess was a Cooper's hawk, because I see them a lot around there, and the banded around the tail. And it has a sort of, a rusty breast, but the picture's so bad, I could not definitively call it a Cooper's hawk. So the mistake, I need to start, I took this with my phone. I don't take my camera with the telephoto because it's heavy to carry for 3 miles.
yeah.
So I could start carrying my binoculars, because if I could have gotten in better, I think I could have figured out what it was. And
Well,
I
that's a good picture with just a phone. You must have been really close to it.
I zoomed in, that's why. But I can't tell the color of the eyes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So this is always like the Coopers or sharp-shinned hawks. So if the first thing we can tell about the shape of this bird and why it's so important is, well, we can tell it's a raptor, right? It's got,
right.
but then it's got this really long tail. And so that's helps us to separate it from like red-tailed hawk or some of those larger raptors. The
Yeah.
accipiters have that really long tail that comes down. Then we're able to say, all right, so it's an accipiter in town, so it's either a Cooper's or a sharp-shinned hawk. Sharp-shinned will be here during the winter. But yeah, from this picture, it's hard to tell whether the tail is rounded, like a Cooper's would be,
Mhm.
or whether it's more squared off, like a sharp-shinned hawk. The other thing to look at is the crown, whether a lot of these, all of these adult accipiters will have a dark crown, and whether that crown goes over the back of the neck, like extends all the way over the back of the neck, that would be a sharp-shinned hawk, or whether it's just the cap, and that's a Cooper's hawk.
Okay.
So those are helpful things. And then just proportion and size, like usually sharp shins are smaller than Cooper's hawks, but that can kind of be variable as well too. But always a good one, just to be thinking about. Again, we have these raptors, and you can put them into different families, and that helps to narrow it down a little bit. All right, any questions we have before we do? I have a very last picture to just share with you, but any questions up to this point, then we'll close up.
No outstanding questions in the chat, but if anyone has anything they haven't put in the chat, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So we'll finish on this. This is a picture that my friend Peggy Steffen sent to me this morning. And it's like, hey, can I use this? This would be kind of fun to talk about. What do you do when you see a bird when you can't see the head of the bird? So she caught this bird flying away. And anyone have guesses as to what bird species this is?
The wings are really distinctive.
They are, aren't they? What else can we catch here? Anything else?
Are the feet extending way back beyond the body of the bird?
Yeah. Who's that shared that? I can't see.
Allison.
Oh, Allison. Yep. Yeah.
Is this
So
a great blue heron?
what's that?
Is this a great blue heron?
Very, very close. So I actually know that it's a great blue heron. I don't think would be this white, and maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, even bigger wings than this guy. It's hard to tell size, but I I think how wide it is might cut out great blue heron, but the right track because that's like those long legs that are sticking out. So with those, the legs look a little yellow to me. So like a great egret would have black legs and feet. So we could eliminate that. It doesn't have the body structure of like a harrier. A harrier and the wings would the wings wouldn't be all white like that.
Is it a night heron?
Yeah, it could be it possibly could be a night heron. That's one I was kind of thinking of, and then the other one was cattle egret.
Doesn't seem quite wide enough for that.
Yeah,
The wingspan's kind of long for that too.
there's a cattle egret or black crowned night heron. Those were two that I was kind of going back and forth. Like I think with the night heron, let me look here in the slip. Does that show it?
Night herons underneath are just kind of pale white and gray and light gray.
Yeah. It's a tough call, but at least, so here's the thing is that we can narrow it down to like, it's amazing without even seeing the head, without seeing really like the behavior other than it flying away, we can at least narrow it down to it's some type of a heron or egret. Probably black crowned night heron or cattle egret. That's pretty cool to be able to, you think about how to narrow birds down. That's just kind of putting that into action. So that's fun. Hey, any last questions, or I'm gonna stop my share here. All right. Well, thank you so much to all of you for being a part of this. And yeah, just want you to know that I'm always willing to help out with different bird ID stuff. People send me a lot of different pictures, and if I have time, I'll get to it and send you it, send some response or something like that. It's one of those fun things that I like to do. But and Jim, people like Jim know that sometimes I don't always get it right either. So take everything I say with a grain of salt and judge it yourself. Hopefully some of these tips will help you do that.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. The recording will be available hopefully later today, definitely this week, and we'll send it out to everyone who's registered. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Right on. See you later.